You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Vaughn.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I have to start with the Brooklyn Nets being absolutely decimated before the restart has gotten underway. Spencer Dinwiddie tested positive for the coronavirus. He may or may not play in Orlando. It's still up in the air. DeAndre Jordan also tested positive for the coronavirus, and he will not play in Orlando. I really don't know if we can have this restart. And I'm not just saying this as a Nets fan, okay? Think about it logically. We've got about a month until the restart gets underway. Do you really think that this is it for positive coronavirus cases? There will be other players that get this. There will be multiple players from the same team to get it. You know, you can live with players getting it if it's scattered around a bunch of teams. If one guy gets it for the Lakers, and one for the Bucks, one for the Clippers, one for the Kings, etc., you can live with that. Especially if it's not a star. If it's a star, that's a whole different ball of wax. Could you imagine if a guy like LeBron gets it? Or Giannis? Or Luka? Or Kawhi? Oh my God. But this is a whole team that has been decimated by this. Think about what the Nets' rotation is going to be. Let's say they go 10 deep. At point guard, you're going to have Tyler Johnson and Chris Chiozza, already striking fear into you. Shooting guard, Karis LeVert and Garrett Temple. Nothing wrong with that. Small forward, Joe Harris and Justin Anderson. I like Harris a lot. Justin Anderson should not be your primary backup. Power forward, Taurean Prince and Rodion Kurucs. Not terrible, not great. I can live with that. That's, you know, for a restart like this, okay, fine. I'm not going to beat hell about that. Center, Jared Allen and blank. Maybe Isaiah Hartenstein. Maybe someone from the G League. I don't know. How can you force a team to play meaningful games with that type of a roster? With three of those guys, Johnson, Anderson, and insert backup center here, not even on the team 4 months ago. I mean, these cases are going to keep piling up and piling up and piling up. There's a real chance that the Nets aren't the only team decimated by this. I understand that this was a punt year for the Nets anyway. And if the Nets go over in the restart, it's not the end of the world. It's not great, but it's not terrible. It's not the end of the world. You can live with that if you're a Nets fan. But here's the thing. You can't guarantee me that the Nets are going to be the only team decimated by this. Realize something. All it takes is one. One person to not wear a mask in public, which, by the way, everyone should wear masks in public. The fact that that's become a political issue is sickening. Everyone should wear a mask in public. And everyone should obey social distancing protocols. Alright? Be smart. Please. But all it takes is one person to not do that. And then that person could become patient zero for a coronavirus outbreak in Disney. I mean, think about this for a minute. Let's say a guy is playing on Tuesday, but he sneaks out Monday night, gets the coronavirus, doesn't know about it, plays a game on Tuesday. He's infected how many people during that game? And by the time he gets a test to show that he has the coronavirus, he's already infected a bunch of people. There's a part of me that wants these sports leagues to take this as a warning sign. Maybe we weren't meant to have a resumption of play this year. It's clear we can't control this. We were given an ounce of freedom. States were starting to roll back restrictions. And then there was a spike in cases in Florida, California, and Texas. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. Just because there's a rollback doesn't mean that everything's okay. You've still got to be smart. It's like my mom says, too much heat. It's not a good thing. I mean, think about this for a minute. You're going to have the NBA send players to Florida, a hot spot for the coronavirus. How does that make any sense? How on God's green earth does that make any sense? How can you say that this little area in Florida is safe when everywhere else in the state is a hotspot for the coronavirus? It makes no sense. I mean, there was one thing that I thought about. If we really want to get the NBA off the ground, I don't know if the NHL is really going to be affected by this. It seems like they've gotten by okay as of right now. I'm okay with letting it play out for baseball and hockey until we need to find a solution. It seems like those sports are okay. I don't think the NBA is. I mean, the Nets could be a cautionary tale of a team decimated by the coronavirus. I mean, by the time the restart hits, you can't tell me that another team won't have multiple players affected with the coronavirus. And it doesn't have to be just getting this horrible disease. It could be players sitting out. I mean, I'll tell you, if one of my teammates got the coronavirus, that's it. Forget about it. I'm not risking it. I don't think it's worth it. I'd sit out anyway. I don't begrudge the players sitting out at all. This was something that I thought of, and I know the chances of this happening are really, really slim. In fact, probably closer to nil than 0.00001%. But New Zealand has been very successful in fighting the coronavirus. They've allowed fans back in the stands. Their number of cases is minimal. Their season for their Basketball League, the National Basketball League, ends August 1st. What I've thought about is negotiating some kind of an agreement where these NBA teams are sent to New Zealand. They're going to quarantine anyway. Go to New Zealand under the strictest of controls and finish the season there. It's clear we can't control it here in the U.S. We just can't. We can't do it safely. That's the thing. If you want to carve out a bubble that can theoretically be conducive for a restart, that's fine. The key word there is theoretically. We're still a month away from the restart. You're going to see more positive cases. And I'm not saying you wouldn't see any positive cases if they went to New Zealand, but they're doing a better job of controlling this than we are here in the U.S. I don't know if it can happen. I don't know if those arenas can support NBA regulations. I don't know about court size. I don't know about any of that. But what I do know is that it's becoming a distinct possibility that we don't have basketball again this year. How can you have a team play that has been decimated by this virus? If the Nets are the only team, okay, fine. But you can't tell me that that's a guarantee. There is a real possibility that other teams have multiple people infected by this. And those number of teams that have these multiple cases of the coronavirus could keep climbing and climbing and climbing to the point that we just can't have a good restart. Would you rather have a restart with quadruple A basketball players or a canceled season? I'd rather have a canceled season. I don't want the game to be made a mockery of. I understand keeping it going for now. I'm not saying cancel it now, but we have to start thinking about it. If there are other teams that become as decimated by this virus as the Nets are, we need to have a serious conversation about canceling the restart. Moving on now to the New York Mets. And they made a bunch of moves yesterday. I'll go through them really fast. They're not, earth-shattering signings by any stretch, but it's good to be able to finally talk baseball. They signed 5 players that are going to be added to the 60-man player pool. Melky Cabrera, Gordon Beckham, Erasmo Ramirez, Hunter Strickland, and Ryan Cordell. Melky Cabrera, I liked him as a Yankee. Hated when he was traded for Javier Vasquez. I understood why he was traded, but to trade him for Javier Vasquez was terrible. Never liked Vasquez, never will. Cabrera has always been a really good player. Hits for okay-ish power, but he hits for average. He's a career .285 hitter. The past 2 seasons, he's hit .280. Good move by the Mets in bringing him in. Gordon Beckham came up like a bat out of hell for the White Sox, and very quickly he petered out. He just wasn't able to keep his great play up from his rookie season. His rookie season, he had .270, 14 homers, 63 RBIs. Just wasn't able to keep that up. And let me tell you, That's pretty darn good for a rookie. He placed 5th in AL Rookie of the Year voting that year. It's worth the Mets bringing him in, but don't expect much from him if he plays for the Mets. Erasmo Ramirez should give the Mets some solid pitching depth. He's been hurt the past couple seasons, but he's shown that he's a solid pitcher in this league. I don't mind the Mets bringing him in. You can never have too much pitching anyway. It's fine. I really have no issue with it. Hunter Strickland is a good reliever. Last year he had a terrible season, but prior to that, he was a really good reliever for the Giants. In his 5 years with the Giants, he went 14-14 with a 2.91 ERA. That's pretty darn good. Like I said, last year he was dreadful. But I don't mind the Mets taking a chance on him and seeing if he can turn it around. Assuming he makes the... what are we going to call this? The opening day roster? The restarted roster? No, you can't even say that. Yeah, I guess the opening day roster. Man, opening day in July. Gee whiz. It's funny, tomorrow's July 1st. We should have NBA free agency officially starting. NHL free agency starting. Instead, we're talking about these leagues finishing up their seasons. Oh, 2020, I hate you. Ryan Cordell is nothing special. He's a quadruple A player. Again, I don't mind the Mets bringing him in, but he probably won't make their... yeah, I guess we're calling it opening day roster. It's fine. You can't go crazy over any of these moves. They're all fine. The one thing I'll say is I've seen a bunch of people say that the Mets are going to benefit heavily from this shortened season and they're going to make a crazy run. They could win the division and go deep in the playoffs. And I can't begrudge people for saying that, but that holds true for every team in the majors. Literally, every single team in the majors I can make that argument for. In 60 games, all you need is one big winning streak and you're in the playoffs, or one big losing streak and you're out of the playoffs. I can't predict who's going to have that and who isn't. I can tell you who has the better rosters on paper, but in 60 games, anything can happen. It's impossible to predict this season. It's impossible to predict the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. It's impossible to predict the NBA playoffs right now. I have no idea how the Mets are going to do. They're in the same boat as everyone else. They have no special advantage, and they have no special disadvantage. Everyone's starting at 0 right now. Alright, this is a very level playing field. This isn't something like a 162-game season where you know the teams with the bad rosters aren't going to make the playoffs. A 60-game season, you can have a bad roster, but all it takes is for those guys to get hot for just 10 or so games, and you're in the playoffs. Is it possible the Mets can make the playoffs? Yes. But for anyone to guarantee it is crazy. I'm not even guaranteeing playoffs for the Yankees. I have no idea how any team is going to do. Any player is going to do. None whatsoever. The one thing I'll say is, when the season gets underway, I will give you team-specific shows about the Yankees. And you can expect those every Monday, like I did for the Islanders and Nets. Alright, it's time to start the trifecta by recapping the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2020 NFL Draft Class. The Buccaneers had a sensational draft to go along with a sensational free agency. We all know what they did in free agency with Brady and training for Gronkowski. Okay, fantastic moves. We all know that. But their draft to support them was amazing. Tristan Wirfs was the 4th offensive lineman taken. In my opinion, he was the best offensive lineman in this draft. I had him 8th on my big board. I don't know how he slipped to 13. I understand slipping from 8 to 13 isn't an egregious drop, but it's still a little bit of a drop. Just a little bit. Wirfs jumped off the tape at Iowa, has the perfect frame, 6'5", 320 pounds, really good speed, ran a sub 540 at the combine, great in pass protection, really, really good in run blocking, smart player, tough player, really durable. Tom Brady had to be doing backflips over that draft pick. That was the perfect pick. Antoine Winfield, in my opinion, was the 27th best player in this draft. He slipped to 45. That's a big slide. No question about that. Then again, every safety slipped in this draft, and I really don't know why. Winfield has a really short frame, and with that comes durability concerns. That's why he was lower on my board than guys like Xavier McKinney and Grant Delpit. But for him to slip to the middle of the second round is egregious. This guy had a great year last year at Minnesota. Incredibly smart. Comes from a great football family with his father. I mean, some of Antoine Winfield Sr.'s football smarts rubbed off on his son. No question about that. They're very similar players. Really good in coverage, really good in run support. He plays the ball really well. Safety was the Buccaneers' biggest need on the defensive side of the ball. Guys like Andrew Adams, Mike Edwards, and Jordan Whitehead aren't going to get the job done. So Todd Bowles had to be doing backflips over that pick. That was a great move to take Winfield. I was really high on Keyshawn Vaughn. I had a solid 3rd round grade on him. I saw him a lot at Vanderbilt because my father went there, so I watched a lot of their games. And I was really impressed with what I saw. Jumped off the tape, was consistently their best player. I understand that's because Vanderbilt has been a terrible team recently, but Vaughn was a man among boys. I like that. I like it when you're the best player on your college team. That does mean something to me. He has a good frame, 5'9.5", 214 pounds. He's really, really fast, good in the passing game, good patience, good power. I'm not the biggest Ronald Jones fan in the world. I don't think he's a terrible player, but I don't think he's great. I think Keyshawn Vaughn can get to greatness. Not saying it's a guarantee, but he has that ceiling. He's going to push Jones for that starting spot. I think Vaughn's going to be a big part of their game plan regardless. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if in a few years Vaughn was the starting running back for the Buccaneers. Tyler Johnson was one of my sleeper prospects. Was really high on him. Saw him a lot in Minnesota. Had a solid 5th round grade on him. That's where he was taken. Jumped off the tape at Minnesota. He had a great career there. I mean, he is one of the best players in the history of that program. And that program has been around for a long time. Plays with a fire under his ass. Good speed. Solid frame. 6'1", 206 pounds. I don't like his ball skills. He has a tendency to get a case of the dropsies. And he doesn't have home run hitting ability in the next level. But I think Tom Brady is going to work wonders with this kid, assuming he even gets on the field. Big assumption, because the Buccaneers are stacked at wide receiver. But assuming he does, I think Johnson's going to immediately prove that he's a contributor in this league. I really, really like that pick. Khalil Davis had a good year last year for Nebraska. Really helped his draft stock. This is a guy who was undraftable 12 months ago. But he played well last year. Showed good speed, good fundamentals. He comes from a good football family. His brother, Carlos, twin brother, also played for Nebraska. So I like the fact that he comes from an athletic family. The thing with Davis is he just doesn't have a lot of tape. You know, he's really raw. He didn't start until last year. Really bad frame. Not the strongest guy in the world. He was worth the pick in the 6th round. The Buccaneers did need to add defensive line help. But Davis's ceiling is really low. I can't hate the pick because it was in the middle of the 6th round, but I don't love it either. Chappelle Russell is a jack of all trades, master of none. I like him in pass coverage. I like him in run defense. He'll be good on special teams. I actually had a late 6th round grade on him, so for the Buccaneers to get him at the end of the 7th round was a big, big, big steal. It wouldn't surprise me if Russell played in this league for 10 years. Raymond Calais, truthfully, I just don't see a spot for him on the Buccaneers. He's going to have a tough time making their opening day roster. Even though the roster's expanded, I don't think they expanded enough for him. They have Jones, they have Vaughn, they have Dare Ogunbowale. Calais played well at Louisiana Lafayette, but he's really small, 5'8", less than 200 pounds. I just don't see him latching on with the Buccaneers. It's possible he can latch on somewhere else, but even then, I just don't see him being a good NFL player. That's really the only pick that I hated for the Buccaneers, but it was one of the last picks in the whole draft. I can't go crazy about it. All in all, I love what the Buccaneers did. Their first 4 picks were home runs. I will ding them a little bit for not using their last 3 picks as well as they could have. I'm gonna give them an A-. Their first 4 picks were that good, they would have gotten an A. I'm bringing their grade down a little bit for their last 3 picks. I thought about giving them a B+, but I gave the Jets a B+, and I think the Buccaneers had a better draft than the Jets, so I'm giving them an A-. Alright, it's time for this day in sports history. On this day, in 1913, Harry Whismur was born. If you're a Jets fan, you should know who this guy is, but you probably don't. If you were to go to MetLife Stadium for a Jets game and poll every Jets fan there, I wonder how many of them would know who Whismur was. This guy was the first owner in the history of the Jets franchise, when they were known as the New York Titans. His biggest contribution to the sport was when he proposed that all AFL owners equally share the proceeds from the broadcast rights to AFL games. So the 2 teams playing in the game televised by, originally it was ABC, wouldn't get all the money. It would be divided among all the teams. Whismur knew that he needed each owner to get as much money as possible, get stable revenue streams, so that way the league could succeed. The thing is, Whismur didn't have a lot of money. He made his money in sports. He was originally a sports broadcaster, and while those guys do make a lot of money, they don't make the money to own a professional football team. The Jets had to play in the Polo Grounds when they started off as the Titans. The Polo Grounds was a dump by then. No one had played there after the Giants moved. I mean, no one liked being there. It was terrible. Especially when you factor in that the Giants were playing in Yankee Stadium, which was well maintained and was a good football venue. The Polo Grounds just was absolutely terrible. He also clashed with a lot of people. He didn't get along with AFL Commissioner Joe Foss. He clashed with the first head coach of the Jets franchise, Slingin' Sammy Baugh. And really quickly, it became clear that Whismur was in over his head. He just shouldn't have been the primary owner of a professional football team. The Jets weren't drawing. The Jets were losing a lot. In Whismur's time as Jets owner, they never finished with a winning record. They wouldn't finish with a winning record until 1967. By then, Sonny Werblin had taken over the team. Whismur sold the Jets for pennies on the dollar compared to what Werblin would get from Leon Hess. Although the one thing I'll say is, when Werblin sold the Jets, he had Joe Namath, and the Jets were on the precipice of doing something really special. When Whismur sold the Jets, they were absolutely dreadful. Although technically they were the Titans. It was Werblin who renamed them the Jets. Whismur wasn't a particularly good owner, but he was a visionary with broadcast rights. He's still the first owner in the history of the Jets franchise. As you all know, I'm a diehard Jets fan, so he has a very notable place in my sports team's histories. May he rest in peace. I really, really mean that. Alright, it's time for another Mount Rushmore. We're on the LA Kings now, and this one is really, really tough. How do you divvy up the Kings teams from the late 80s, early 90s with Gretzky, and obviously Robitaille? He was there first. And the Kings teams in this past decade that won 2 Stanley Cups. Wayne Gretzky never won a Stanley Cup with the Kings. He made a Stanley Cup in '93, but he lost to the Canadiens in 5 games. The Kings also had some good teams before Gretzky got there. Not great teams by any stretch, but they were playoff teams. This one was really tough, but I think I sorted it out. The correct Mount Rushmore is Marcel Dionne, Luc Robitaille, Jonathan Quick, and Wayne Gretzky. Dionne was the best player on those early Kings teams that made the playoffs a bunch of times. Yeah, they never won the last game of the season, and Dionne is the best player in NHL history to never win a Stanley Cup. But Dionne is the Kings' all-time leader in points and assists. He's second in goals, and even then he's only 7 behind Robitaille. I had to put him number 1. Robitaille was picked in the 9th round of the '84 draft. And the knock on him was he couldn't skate. And look, was Robitaille a strong skater in the NHL? Probably not. There were faster players than him. But he made up for that with the fact that he was basically a point-a-game player in his career. He was a point-a-game player for the Kings. Him and Gretzky were insane together. If you ever have the opportunity to watch some of their old games together, watch them. They were great. Jonathan Quick won the Conn Smythe Trophy in 2012 when the Kings won the Stanley Cup, and he was insane in that playoff run. 16-4 with a .946 save percentage and a 1.41 goals against. The 16 wins led the league, as did the save percentage and the goals against. He also led the league in playoff shutouts with 3. He is a great, and I mean great, playoff goalie. Had to put him in instead of Kopitar. And Wayne Gretzky, I'm putting last because he just didn't spend as much time with the Kings as these other guys did. Quick has spent 13 years with the Kings. Robitaille spent 14 years with the Kings. Dionne spent 12 years with the Kings. Gretzky only spent 8 years with the Kings. Have to ding him a little bit for that. But when he was there, he was the best player in the NHL by far. In 539 games, he had 918 points. That's almost, forget point a game, 2 points per game. That's a video game-like number. And even then, I don't think I've ever done that in an NHL video game. I've been playing NHL video games since NHL 11. I've never done that. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying, then I wouldn't want to be the youngest GM. I'd want to stick around to be the oldest.